We usually analyze the lives of warriors from different historical eras: Crusaders, Legionnaires, and Spartans. This is interesting, but do not forget that peaceful life also has its own fascination, sometimes even more destructive. Surely everyone has come across the frightening appearance of plague doctor costumes: glass eyes, long cloaks, beak-shaped masks. This appearance is closely associated with something gloomy and strict, but in fact, unusual personalities are hidden behind these masks. Today we will plunge into the everyday life of a plague doctor and try to understand that they are actually not just scary figures, but cuties doing good deeds. Let's meet Harry Kane, who will spend a day in his life with us in 1650 in the beautiful city of Edinburgh. Harry works as a plague doctor and lives on the outskirts of the city in a luxurious house filled with valuable items. At the local bar, drinks are poured for him for free, and even the church, despite Harry's defiant appearance, is in no hurry to sentence him to a fire. At a time when the courtyard of the 17th century, the burning of plague was considered commonplace, this action is surprising. Why is Harry outside of the usual stereotype? Because his profession is fighting the plague. All continents suffer from this terrible disease, the mortality rate of which reaches 95%. Symptoms begin with pain and swelling of the lymph nodes, followed by fever. Buboes, tumors on inflamed lymph nodes, are characteristic of the plague. In various sources, the medieval era is often associated with the bubonic plague because of this symptom. However, the plague was also known in biblical times. Mention of it can be found, for example, in the description of the war between the Israelites and the Philistines. Transmission of the disease occurs through the bites of rats and fleas, which can carry the infection in the same way as humans. In our time, plague is easily treated with antibiotics, but the first vaccine did not appear until 1934. Thus, the plague is not only a phenomenon of the Middle Ages, but also a disease that was present in different eras and cultures. So let's look at Harry Kane and his life from the other side. He is not only a doctor who faces the horror of the disease, but also a person who seeks to help and care for others in difficult times. The Bible itself attributes God's punishment to the plague, and although the descriptions of the growths are more reminiscent of buboes, the death threat is likely associated with the plague. In more recent times, even in our own century, massive cases of disease have come to be called pandemics. One of them was the Justinian pandemic, which began in 550, which over the course of 30 years claimed more than 100 million lives, almost a third of the population of the civilized world at that time. Since then, the plague has periodically returned, leaving terrible traces. In 1352, the next pandemic claimed 25 million Europeans, a third of the continent's population. Russia also faced the disease. In 1654–55, an epidemic claimed 700,000 lives. Half of Moscow was devastated. Even in an advanced medical society like the USSR, the plague left its mark. Over the entire period of the existence of the state, it claimed 2,000 lives. In the USSR, there was a network of plague doctors whose work was strictly secret. They monitored and controlled the spread of the disease, preventing it from spreading. The history of the plague is closely connected with the history of mankind. Even after the advent of vaccines in the early 20th century and until 1963, more than 12 million people died from the plague. The USSR played an important role in the fight against the disease, and thanks to this, the plague does not pose a threat in the CIS countries. In 1650, Harry Kane lived in Edinburgh, who could not boast of such a legacy of medical science. He tried to treat people according to the heritage of Greek and Roman medicine. Although in those days doctors were often considered eccentrics, and most turned to priests, plague doctors such as Harry began to appear when it became obvious that prayers would no longer help, and it was necessary to take action. At a time when thousands of corpses testified to the disease, medicine began to move from a standstill. Despite limited methods, doctors attempted to treat wounds using a variety of methods, including cauterization, bloodletting, and even leeches. But progress has been slow. However, plague doctors wore distinctive costumes with cloaks and masks to protect themselves from infection. The first such costumes were invented in 1619 by the French physician Charles de Lomo. It was he who invented and developed that unique equipment. Hundreds of years ago, doctors wore anything, but our Harry is a true master in his field. He wears specialized clothing that perfectly matches his role as a plague doctor. On Harry's head is a helmet, which is actually the prototype of a gas mask. This helmet covers the entire head, including the eyes, and provides protection with glass eyepieces. It gives the costume a special zest. But this is not just a decoration. Harry places strong-smelling herbs and medicines in the beak of the helmet. This was especially helpful when he was dealing with patients who weren't particularly refreshing with scents. Sometimes, when meeting with corpses, he had to not faint from the stench. Also, the part of the beak in contact with the nose was covered with a sponge with incense. Harry also constantly chewed on garlic. The next element is the cloak, and its main purpose is to protect the doctor's body. Like other plague doctors, Harry avoids physical contact with patients by using long gloves, high boots, and a cane. The cane serves as a tool for examining patients, cauterizing wounds, and, if necessary, self-defense from aggressive infected. The raincoat also performs an important function. It provides complete protection. Harry is carefully smearing his clothes with grease and wax. This ingenious move reliably prevents the attacks of fleas, the main carriers of the disease. However, garlic is useless here and does not protect against the plague, since the disease can also be transmitted through the air, not only through contact. So while a plague doctor costume like Harry was effective, the mortality rate was still high. This is due to the fact that the plague was transmitted not only through contact, but also through the air. Consider what components make up the TYP of the plague doctor. Immediately, several types can be distinguished. The first category is scavengers, and one of Harry's most common tasks is the removal and burial of corpses. This was especially in demand among deeply religious nobles, who, in turn, sometimes forgot about religious rites. The lords from Edinburgh could call in doctors to remove the corpses and dispose of them, sometimes even dumping them into a canal. In addition to the main work of removing corpses, plague doctors could enrich themselves with various things found in the homes of the dead. Greed often outweighed the survival instinct, and Harry, who owns a house with a rich heritage, could not resist the temptation. The removal of corpses, however, was only part of his occupation. There were also doctors who specialized exclusively in this type of work. They can be called scavengers. Let's move on to another category. The second category, to which our Harry belongs, is orderlies. These doctors sincerely wanted to help, but they were limited by the harsh reality where medicine had not developed for 5 centuries. This category of doctors was also involved in the removal of corpses, but at the same time they tried to receive patients. Most often, the method of treatment consisted in opening the inflamed lymph nodes with a special scalpel and their subsequent cauterization. However, the operation was painful and extremely difficult. Doctors were faced with a lot of inflamed nodes, and even the slightest mistake could derail the whole process. However, Harry has had successful cases of treatment. Despite all efforts, the proportion of patients who recovered remained low compared to mortality. Therefore, Harry lived on the outskirts and was almost ostracized from society. Due to his profession, he was considered an outcast. But nevertheless, as a sign of respect for his profession, he was provided with free drinks. Such generosity could sometimes lead to drunken brawls with disgruntled relatives of the dead. It should be noted that even up to the 19th century, astrology was considered a more prestigious science than medicine. In addition, some of the orderlies resorted to eccentric methods of treatment. For example, some of them fed sick spiders, believing that they were able to absorb the disease. Others forced the sick to smell horse droppings in the hope of eradicating the disease. The most creative physicians have placed cans on patients to dry out bad energy, and have also applied frogs and leeches in treatment. However, the third and least common category of plague doctors included the seers. These individuals were educated and tried to apply their ingenious abilities to solve the problem. For example, the famous Nostradamus, although he was engaged in predictions, also made a significant contribution to the fight against the plague. His ability to use knowledge helped him become a successful doctor, and even the Parliament of one of the regions of France awarded him a lifetime pension for his contribution. Among the seers were other personalities, such as the DSHK surgeon, who isolated himself from society and systematically studied and removed plague growths. However, despite their efforts, their treatments were not always effective. The disease retained its deadly force, and its spread was due not only to shortcomings in medical practice, but also to the total unsanitary conditions of that time. Dirt and unwashedness were common, making it easier for the infection to spread. Plague doctors, despite their not the most favorable reputation, were some kind of straws that the powers that be clung to. Cities might not like them, but recognize their need, as they were among those who fought the plague. Our Harry Kane also ended up on a contract with the local mayor, earning £110 a month for his work, a hefty sum at the time. Despite the risks and dangers that accompanied his profession, he did an important job. Perhaps it was thanks to the efforts of such plague doctors that one of our ancestors survived this difficult era.